Yeah, you're gonna unmute it.
Are we good? Okay.
Bob, you with us? We have
Oh,
a remote
Okay, Bob's here.
council member.
I'm good.
So I'd
Okay.
like to make a motion to come back into open session for the special meeting.
All's in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. All right. Welcome, Jim. This interview is supposed to take about a half hour long. That's about how long each of them are going. I'll be leading it, and then could be some follow-up questions based on your answers, either from myself or other council members. But before we go any further, we have a little bit of a disclosure from our attorney, Chapman.
How are you doing? As you know, this position's for the vacancy for the seat that was held by Robert Epps. Village Council went through a process called an motion for the removal, and that was based upon lack of attendance since May of 2019. He was given a notice and an opportunity to be heard, but there was no objection or appearance. So in April, Village Council voted unanimously to remove Councilman Epps, and he was given that order or notification of that on April 9th, and there hasn't been any further action. And we tell you this as part of this interview because we've been informed that someone could challenge the appointment, and that would be through what we call as a quo warranto action. And that is an action where somebody challenges the right of whoever either elected or appointed to the position, their right to have that. It is generally brought by the Attorney General because it's the public's right to have somebody in the right office. However, an individual can get the consent from the Attorney General to bring a private action. So it could happen provided the Attorney General allows that and sufficient security is posted by them. I do think if anybody was to bring it out of study it, because the motion procedure has been recognized by the courts in North Carolina, and I believe Village Council acted properly. One of the reasons we wanted to make this disclosure is any village funds cannot be used in defense of a legal action. So if there was a legal action and you wanted to respond with an attorney, that would be an individual expense. We just want to start that off at the beginning and make that disclosure.
Fair.
That being said, are you willing to continue with the interview?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, welcome and thanks for coming and thanks for throwing your hat in the ring, if you will. How long you been here?
About 5 years.
5 years, okay. Where'd you move from?
I was in Matthews before
Okay.
that, and I was up on Lake Norman before.
Okay, so you're fairly familiar with this area for some time. That's
Yeah.
good, good. Well, welcome. So you've been here 5 years. If you had one sentence to describe Marvin, what would it be?
I think it's family centric. I think most people move here because they want proximity to things like Blakeney and the nice shopping areas, etc. But they also want that country feel, not in the big city, less of the traffic, less of the other problems that you deal with as you move closer into town.
Okay. So close enough to what you said, the big box stores, I guess, and those areas, or what did you say? Close proximity.
I just think you want proximity to some of the shopping and
Proximity to
amenities
shopping,
and other
that's
things that Mecklenburg offers, but you want less taxes. That's one of the reasons a lot of people come out here, and bigger lots, more nature, and less congestion. Basically, I know that's what drove us this direction,
Okay.
along with exceptional schools.
Good, good. So what's your vision for Marvin in his future? Being here 5 years, what do you see happening, or what would
So,
you like to see happen?
I would compare us toward Weddington if
Okay.
I were doing some comparisons, right? And as I look at Weddington, I think they've done some things as you head toward their center. You've got Optimist Club Park, you've got areas that are recreation, sports, etc. for the kids. I think that's lacking in the Marvin area. You don't have a lot of those fields, facilities, etc. to use as part of the village. You do have them in Union County. You can head out to Henry Nesbitt toward.
I can't hear the person. I'm sorry, I'm on the phone. I cannot hear the person. Can other people hear?
I think the mask probably does that because I project pretty well. So is that better?
Is that someone that just piped in?
Here now, thank you.
Cool. All right, so my wife wanted me to wear that,
Sure.
but I'm
Here's the
gonna
mic.
set it here and get yelled at later.
That's all right.
So in any case, you know, if I'm looking at it, I think that there's a lot of people that move here specifically for schools, for family, for those type of things, right? And I don't think that we should ever lose that as what people want. And that's the reason that they come this direction. And so whatever we're doing should be driven with that in mind. Safety, the ability to walk to places without having to be afraid of it. I mean, we had a huge tragedy right outside of my neighborhood, and that just simply shouldn't happen in this area, and we should do a better job of protecting our citizens. So I know, you know, some of the future questions come into development and everything, but I think no matter what we do, it should be based on community feel, it should be based on the ability to feel comfortable with your family there, it should be based on the ability to potentially walk safely to and from whatever happens to be there from the surrounding neighborhoods, and that we shouldn't deviate from that as a basis.
Okay. So if I took a deeper dive into Marvin and his future, you mentioned Weddington and Optimist Parks and safety and stuff like this. So we're almost built out now. So how do you see making something like ball fields happen and stuff?
And obviously the area over here where the school was going to go that got kind of pulled out of, right, is a spot, or is it?
Oh,
Right.
you're
So
looking at the I forget the road.
It's,
off of Waxhaw
Oh,
Market
the
Road.
trees
Yeah.
over there. Okay.
So, you know, there's spots there, there's different spots. Obviously, the land out here is expensive. So, you know, what does that mean? How much would the village have to support it? Those kind of things are definitely big factors in something like that. But I think that it's important that we maintain at least a vision that says that's what we want to do, is that we want to strive to maintain a family-centric focus, basically. You know, and so anything that we do, and it doesn't have to be ball fields per se, but it's something that as I walked around my own neighborhood as an example for you know, our homeowners association and some of the open questions and kind of surveyed people for what their thoughts were, that was the one that kept coming up of, it'd be really nice if we had somewhere that if we wanted to go play flag football, or if we wanted to practice lacrosse, or if we want to do whatever, because we can't use the fields at the schools because Union County doesn't allow it. We can't, you know, so there's things like that that are prevented, that if you have something like an Optimist type complex, becomes more available to your bubble.
It reminds me of one of the things that we did. There was a big investment in the elementary school with that field and the improvements, and then right away the county took it over and said, yes, you know, it's not really used for community and stuff, even though there was private funding with that sort of thing. So happens a lot, and it's frustrating, especially when you don't have necessarily land, or it becomes too cost prohibitive, if you will.
Right.
What do you think needs improvement in Marvin?
I do think there's safety items, right? Some of them have been done. So if you look at Marvin School Road as an example, there's now a sign that says 35 mile an hour zone ahead, right? Because that speed limit changes right before you get to the school, but people never really pay attention to that, unfortunately. So if I'm looking at it, you know, in our own neighborhood as an example, we have a lot of teenagers that have decided that, you know, they don't have anything better to do, so our amenity center is a nice place for them all to go and hang out and do some things they probably shouldn't be doing. So realistically, you know, we privately have looked at funding like a sheriff to be on site over periods of time. I think that as a village, being able to have a deputy that's stationed here regularly, being able to have someone, because we had someone pretty good up until a year and a half, I guess, ago, when he got reassigned to a different area. And we haven't necessarily had that same level of engagement, the new person who's assigned to this area, since then. So it would be nice if we could kind of drive that to be a little bit more, because you know, there's a lot of very wealthy kids that have nothing better to do and find ways to get themselves in trouble. And frankly, it's not necessarily good for the property owners here a lot of the time.
Okay. So, given that, you know, you want to improve safety, to accomplish that, you would do what? Because we've added we were listening to the survey that just came out, they clearly said they were fine with another officer. We had to increase the tax a penny, which basically paid for the officer. So what else would you see as far as safety? Is there anything else you would see doing other than adding an officer?
I think lighting is a big one. So, you know, the tragedy outside of our neighborhood as an example, there's no reason that Joe Kerr Road as an example is as dark as it is. There's no reason that it's not a little bit, you know, better illuminated, that there's not a stop sign in the middle of it, for example, would be the way I would go with it. So where, say, Wheatfield Drive hits Joe Kerr, cut it in half and people don't get going for quite as long and therefore don't get going quite as fast, you know. But whatever it happens to be, I think that that's just a direct example for where I am. But the same holds true if you're going over to Marvin Road and you're going through the Firethorn area and everything. I think that, you know, people are in a hurry in general. Luckily, that's one of the positives of the current situation is people aren't in as big a hurry as they were. So, you know, some of that's taking care of itself, but I do think that some of that, you know, the roundabout that's going to come in over here, when it does come in, I think will help some with that. We'll get rid of Lake Marvin, as some people like to call it.
Lake Marvin.
Yeah, the giant pothole that's at the corner there. You know, so I think that some of those things are doable. Realistically, most of the concern points that we have here aren't major crimes. They're simply a lack of being able to watch what's going on. And I think that's the primary thing that'll help with some of the safety issues.
Okay. So if you look at Marvin as a whole, 5 years old, said name one good thing, name one bad thing. What do we got right here, and what do we really?
The good thing, I think, is the 1 acre lot type basis, right? The bigger plots, you know, ensuring that at least, even if a subdivision may have smaller lots in it, it's at least spreading it to where it still averages out to your acre, it does the things it needs to. It gives a different feel because you get less heads per acre. Basically, in that scenario, you prevent some of the overcrowding in the schools, you prevent some of the other activities from occurring. I think that's a real good side we have going on. Probably the downside of it is just transparency that I've seen. I mean, honestly, my wife is much better about reading through everything than I am, but luckily she gives me the cliff notes on everything, so I get to hear every bit of it. She was the president of our homeowners association for a couple of years and is still on the board there. I think the lack of transparency there, of just knowing what's going on, leads to the cliquish. Everybody talks about something. If they don't already know, then they make something else up to satisfy it, and then it spreads around. So, you know, this is another good example of positive coming out of things like the COVID situation, is now there's these Zoom calls, right? So the more that those are happening, people may not choose to watch it, but at least they can. And if they can, then you've made progress in being able to provide that transparency.
Okay. So, with your qualifications, you got background in technology and stuff. How do you think your experience would prepare you to serve on the village here?
So I have worked for Wells Fargo for 21 years now. I manage extensive teams, projects, enterprise-wide implementations and solutions. I know people. I actually supported our internal fraud processes for 15 years. And in that process, I've gotten real good at learning behaviors and what motivates people and what they're looking for. But I think the bottom line is I have to sell my people, my product, and my staff to executives, to other folks, right? And I think that's something that is needed within our village, is to package ourselves and sell ourselves to our community on a regular basis, and ensure that they understand that we're not doing something out of a ulterior motive or a self-serving practice. We're doing it because we honestly believe that that's what's in the best interest of our community and how we strive to make it better for the long term. And I think that's, in a nutshell, what kind of bundles me together from an understanding standpoint of how to interact, how to sell those things, how to package something, and extensive project management, operations management, so real good at running large-scale organizations.
As far as your duties, how do you see that your duties as a council member? Whether it's interactions or just your plain duties, what do you see as the duties?
I think your responsibility is to represent what the community wants, and in order to do that, you need to ensure that you're speaking with those in the community and actually reaching out and having conversations with not one or two people or a clique of people, but a broader set of individuals. And there's a multitude of different ways to go about that. But regardless of the method of doing it, it's making sure that you're really listening and taking the time to listen to what people's opinions are, and then helping provide them a voice at the table.
Excuse me. I know it's 6 o'clock, but both of you have to speak up just a little bit to be picked up on the mic.
I apologize.
Sorry, it's getting the end of the day here.
I know.
I just started with this, so I don't know.
So next 2 years, next 24 months, what do you see as the 3 biggest major issues that we are facing?
I think that you have a lot of very expensive homes. I mean, you can just look at any of the surveys or studies that are out there for North Carolina, and you'll see that per capita wealth in Marvin is the largest in the state of North Carolina, right? So I think that arguing over a penny in taxes is silly at any point in time, because when I get a tax bill and it's $300 a year or something, it's not something you think about. It's a nice dinner out somewhere. So the people here in general can't afford more, and I don't think that it's that big a deal to honestly ask that question and move forward with some plans that actually allow for betterment in a way that the community wants or supports. But we have to ensure that as we're doing that, we recognize that everybody wants a voice in it and wants to know that what they're paying for is really something that they want. So the community was built with the premise of larger lots, of controlling schools, of a great school area, and family-centric. Knowing that if you use the premise of what created the community in the first place, and you use that in what you're offering to them, I think you're going to get a lot of support from folks, because it's not generally I need to save $100 a year off of my taxes. I just don't think that's what your populace is, and if that's the way we're looking at it, we're missing the boat.
Any other issues other than like what I think I'm hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, we're in an affluent community that taxes, I assume, we haven't raised them in 14 years. So,
Okay.
And when we raised it a penny, we get called out for raising them 20%. So it's all how you spin it, right? So
It's always
and it sounds horrible, but to your point, every bit of that money is going towards an officer. So any other issue other than your willingness to go out there and maybe present a picture of us willing to spend more, or dig deeper into from a tax base and to address those any other concerns?
I mean, I think there are other concerns, but the other concerns are things that we influence, we don't control. So a lot of the items that we're talking about wind up being state projects or county projects that we need to ensure we're providing that voice for our constituents. But in the end, that's what we can do, is try to help move things along in a direction that the community wants, but we're not going to own the final decision on that. We're just going to be able to influence it. I think that streamlining and simplifying some of the processes, and I'll use an example of tennis court lights for our homeowners association as an example. It was a 20-month process, I think.
Still haven't got them though.
We still don't have them.
We approved them a while.
We still don't have them, right? Because we wound up spending that money on something else over the time, right? So while we were waiting to figure that out. But I think those kind of things, whatever we can do to make it simpler, because there are certain things that should be easy and make sense, and you can see are bettering a community, and if they are, then how do we offer some easy button scenarios to make those things happen for people?
So, you come on to council, say you come on to council, when we have meetings, we could get into the subject and there's conflict between you and maybe one or two other things. How do you see yourself resolving that with other members of council? And can you give us an example of how you resolved an issue where you had conflict?
Sure. I deal with conflict on a daily basis. I deal with regulators for a living. So realistically, I think that conflict is good. Different opinions are good. If you don't have multiple people with different voices expressing those voices, you miss things. And it's really important that those things be called out initially and upfront, and that you strive to actually have some of that conflict occur, because that conversation is what keeps you from making the big mistake later. And so I work in technology, and everybody's probably heard the terms agile, right? Well, the whole point of agile is to fail fast and fail forward, right? The whole point is that you put something together, you illustrate it, you show it, and you demonstrate it. And people may like it or hate it, but whichever way it is, they know what it is, and they can understand it, and then you can move forward from there, and you have a basis. And what I think that a lot of people wind up in is churn. You go through a process, and in that process you have ideas, and you get stuck in an idea phase for a really long period of time, and you talk through it, and you wind up with this thing that becomes so big and it's so vacuous that you can't understand it. Nobody can. And it's like mortgage-backed securities as an example, right? There's 5 people in the world that understand what they are. So realistically, you've got to be able to avoid those situations. You got to be able to break things into sizable chunks that you can consume, and you got to be able to talk them out and have a discussion. How do I handle that conflict? I'm very open and direct. So the one thing that people may or may not like, the edge I have at times, you saw me come in a Philly mask, right? So I'm from the Northeast, and that's how I operate.
There's another Philly fan here.
Okay. So
I have to deal with that too.
Realistically, I'm from just north of Philly originally, and been an Eagles fan forever, but there's a certain level of Southern politeness and charm that tends to potentially not get you where you need to be, right? And so a little bit of that, just get to the point and be direct about it versus bless your heart, probably is needed at times.
So about listening and complaints or issues, I use an example of Bob, who's now on the council. There was a time where we had to go to him as council members, and as much as I wanted to help him, I couldn't help him. But you're the kind of guy that are willing to listen to him, and if you find yourself in situations where you can't solve their problem to their liking, how do you handle that? And more about your listening skills, I guess.
So my listening skills to what somebody's complaint in the community is that the question?
Right.
Sure. So I run complaints management for our company, which has been all over the news, right? So we have to put a new process in place, which involves extensive training, hours and hours of training per person throughout a 300,000 person company. And within that, you have to basically get to a point of, okay, I understand what you're trying to say, articulate it back to them, and then let them know that there's nothing you can actually do about it at that point in time, but what you can do is ensure that it makes it onto the table in the area where it needs to be discussed. So it's all about taking the notes, articulating the problem back to them, making sure that they understand that they've been hurt, and that you're not the person that can take the action, but that you will put it in the hands of the people that can. So in my opinion, that's your best way to work through those type of issues.
Okay. Apologize, I'm just making some notes.
Am I talking loud enough?
No.
Yeah, you're good now.
Okay.
So if you're chosen to serve on this board, do you have some items in mind you'd like to see the council address right away?
I did not understand what you just said.
I'm sorry. If you are chosen to serve on this board, do you have some items in mind that you would like to see council address right away?
No, I can't say that I have an agenda of any kind, honestly, other than I would love to see less drama in the community. And I think that's probably my number one reason for putting my hat in the ring, as you put it, is that there, I think, are a lot of assumptions that people make, stories that are made up. I don't know if they're true, false, or indifferent because I don't have the facts. So I'm a very facts-oriented person that would like to see it firsthand and be able to make an informed decision versus living off of gossip of some kind. And the reality is that I think that there are some good ideas. I think that some form of town center, as an example, that's a good idea. What it looks like specifically, what's in it, that's when you start to get to the devil in the details. But I can tell you that this is not representative of our community, and that something different than this would probably be better for us as a community.
Okay. Can I ask a follow-up question on
Sure.
less drama in the community? What do you think causes the drama in the community? In your opinion, on the outside looking in?
The outside looking
Yeah.
in, weird emails from some source that show up periodically would be part of it. Stories from partially informed people that have maybe 20 to 40% of information on something would be part of it. Complete lack of any information, but a rumor that something is happening that then everybody plays a telephone game and adds their own piece to, is part of it. So I think the more that something is published and out there in writing, 2.2, and credit where credit is due, I will tell you that over the last month or so, I've probably seen 4 different communications come out that are better than any communication I've seen in the previous 5 years that have actual details explaining FAQs of what a government change might look like, why it is in the right frame of mind toward how other communities are run in the state, those type of things, right? I think that does a great job of providing transparency, providing where you're at. People may agree or disagree with it. That's not what you're trying to solve. You're not trying to get everybody to agree with you. You're just trying to make sure that they understand what you did, why you did it, and what your basis is for it. And then they can make an informed decision on whether they like it or not. But I think the lack of knowing that, and like I said, I think it's improved greatly over the past 4 to 6 weeks, effectively, is about the timeline that I'd say for what I've seen.
Services. With low taxes, which means, by all means, we have great ordinances that you point out, large lots and stuff like that, but what services do you see us getting into, if any?
It'd be amazing if we could figure out a way to annex just some little annoying pieces of property that are county owned, that I sat in here and made a comment. I think I referred to something as a retirement community that got me yelled at later. It's an over 55 active community or whatever that's outside of our neighborhood. But in any case, I think that if you drive across the Union County line toward my neighborhood, which is the first one, basically from Marvin Creek, right? As soon as you cross the line, you notice the difference. And whatever we can do to strike some deals to make it so that, if you look at the median in between Hunter Oaks and Kingsmead, as an example, it looks better than what it looks like when you cross the bridge to come into our county. Why is that? It's because they take the time and spend the money to do that as communities. And I think that the more that we could do that to beautify some of these areas, even if we don't own them, if we can make an agreement to do it, I think that adds to some of the aesthetics of the area. And I'm using that as an example because it's so dramatic, but same holds true with that median as you're coming down Tom Short Road into Marvin Creek, and who owns what in there. And Rohit knows this very well because he sat here and worked through it with us about 9 months ago maybe. Can we weed whack this, or are we going to get in trouble for trespassing because we just wanted to go knock it down, right?
Right.
I think some of those things they seem little, but it's amazing how much first impressions matter as people are coming into an area like this. And I think that that's important for something that we should really look at.
Talk to us, if you would, about your feelings of development and what Marvin may be lacking, if anything.
I don't think it's lacking a lot. I think that some of the areas are still county-based areas. We're still sitting at a 45-mile-an-hour speed limit, as an example, going down half of Marvin Road. I'm not saying I'm not in a hurry. I drive really fast a lot of the time too. I don't do it here. And I don't do it right outside of the neighborhoods where there's sidewalks that are 2 feet off the side of the road where kids should be able to walk to school safely, right? So there's areas where it just doesn't make sense that the speed limit is what it is. There's areas, and I don't know what we can do as a council. I can't say that I'm versed well enough on that area of it, but it's something I'd like to see taken into account is safety, lighting, things that make it so that I feel like this should be a little bit of a, let's use a time warp as the basis, right? When I was a kid, I could go out, I could ride my bike, and I wasn't afraid of somebody coming by and throwing me in a van and disappearing forever. And that's kind of, unfortunately, the world that we're living in these days, but we have a bubble here to some extent. It's one of the things that draws people over here. So protecting that bubble so that it's not getting run over, so it's not getting hit by a car when you're out for a jog. It's those kind of things. I think that's really important.
So, I know you touched a little bit on this, but as far as your responsibility of spending money, other people's money, which is the taxpayers and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I used, if you heard me, the idea of we have a town hall. We estimated it was going to be 900,000 or 600,000 is what we had in the kitty. We raised it to 900. The first bid, after many efforts, was the lowest bid, I should say, out of 3 was pretty close to double what our budget was, 1.8, 1.7.
Mm-hmm.
How do you deal with that kind of our responsibility of, we have a low tax rate, which everyone likes, but then there's all these demands. So how do you balance that, and how do you look at that as far as spending goes?
I look at taxes as a basis for what services you get, for what you get for your money, basically, right? And so I think that where we are, our taxes should be a little higher because we should expect a slightly higher level of beauty. We should expect a slightly higher level of services, of parks, of those kinds of things, right? So that's my own personal take. I'm not saying that the community supports that. I don't know. But here's what I do know is that our homeowners association is 367 homes. And there was a big deal of wanting to change our pool structure within our community. Potential of a slide, potential all these other things that wanted to be done. And the big thing that I pushed for was that we really need to ensure that we get a representative sample of the community, that we survey them in a manner that's effective, that provides them the facts of what we're planning to do, and that provides backing that says this percentage of the community backs this idea and wants to do it. So that we know we're on the right side of things for the people we represent from fiduciary responsibility standpoint, right? And so in doing that, we were able to knock out 3 things from a wish list of 6 items and say, there's just not enough backing from the community to do this. It doesn't make sense. Throw those away. 2 of them were borderline. We did half, effectively, of what we planned to do, and we used that as a baseline. But I'll go back to your original question because there's part of it that sticks out to me that I just go, I don't understand, which is I'm not sure how there was ever a budget of $600,000 for something that would be a town center type item in this community. That doesn't compute as something that we would ever have done in the first place, because I think the worst thing that you can do in these situations is set unrealistic expectations, and you need to manage those expectations in the first place. So that budget should have been closer to what you really thought it was when it was set in the first place.
I agree with you. If you go back on the records, I said 600 isn't going to do
haven't
it.
looked
Even
at
if
it
we
before.
got the land for free, you can't build a commercial building for 600,000 with what we
For whatever it's worth, that would be, when
So as far as our last question, before we ask questions from yourself, and feel free to fill in anyone, do you have anticipate any difficulties in the regular meetings? We have Tuesday nights at 6:30, second Tuesday of every month. We make the schedules at the beginning of the year, and then last Thursday of every month is at 9 o'clock. Usually goes 3 hours to 4. We went, 4 or 5 hours today? 4 hours today, so we got a lot on the agenda to fix. So, any issues with making those meetings?
No, I have a very flexible schedule.
Okay, good. Questions for us?
So you asked me a question and I'm done answering. I can ask you the same question back, which is, what do you see the role of the council member being?
Well, I'll speak for myself, and then certainly I'll let other council members, but I've always looked at this job, regardless of what you may have heard in the things, is from whatever medium that you hear it from, is do no harm. I mean, I bought in here, and I came in here for many of the same reasons so many other people did. I was looking, at real estate. I have that background, but you can't ask the real estate agent. They can't answer you if there are kids in the neighborhood. So I was looking in backyards for swing sets and an environment where we weren't on top of people and stuff. So I look at that, and I loved what I saw, and I looked at what our ordinances were and stuff, and what in the same time, I recognize in this position, I travel quite a bit. And I'll be honest with you, I was down in Florida somewhere in a very high density with lights everywhere. And all I could think about is, how in the hell did this get approved? And because it was just so much and stuff, and it's like, so where I'm at, I'm very happy, and it's like, and one of the frustrating things for me in government is that things move very slowly, because you can't just go do what you want to do. It takes a committee, it takes working together, it takes listening to the community. It takes a big backbone, because you're accused of things that you want to do, but I want to do no harm for the community. And I think what a lot of other people, when I filled out the response, I think I was in line with most of the people. So it's about serving the community and say, okay, like, you're asking me to do this, I want to do this, but there are all these hurdles. And a lot of them, as Jamie, you found out, that is because we don't have the funding for it. And one of the questions, instead of raising taxes, maybe we can look at the donut holes, and how do we bring those communities that are right in the center of Marvin but aren't paying Marvin taxes. So there's a way to increase our basis without, increasing the taxes for the community. So I like low taxes. I'd like to keep in that. I'm proud that we weren't able to do anything for 14 years. And I'm a realist too, that we're not going to build a nice building for $600,000. That was the original. Even $1 million, I go back on the records. I said, we're lucky if we touch it for double that price. And that's about where it came in. So it's about service, listening to people, and I just wish people would understand the communication is frustrating too. I think we all talk about that, and we're working towards it. So any help with that type of thing, and it's where you're getting your information from. It's garbage in, garbage out and stuff. So we're trying to do a better job at that. It's just, we can't be as responsive, because before we send something out, we almost have to have a committee mentality before we can send something out. Individually we can, in the opinion of one, but as a committee we can't. Anyone else want to share?
It's all about serving the community for me. It's being a voice for your neighbors and your friends, and being willing to listen to all sides of the issue and come to a consensus about what's really best for the community. So, I've got, fifth grader going into sixth grade, that we're not going anywhere. We've been here for almost 10 years. We love it. And I just want to make it an even better place to live. I like what you said about being family centric. I think that's absolutely true. So I'm really just here to serve the community and listen to what the people want to do and try to implement that.
Jen, you want to add?
No, I echo that, I've been here for almost 20 years. Right at 20 years, and I want, like Joe said, going down to Florida, coming back here, what I've always wanted, and I think, for many years they've done a good job with this, is being proud of living in Marvin. But you don't have the big box stores, you don't have all the stuff, you have enough to keep that quaint. People come here because of the quaint. How do we continue to make it quaint? But yet provide some little nuggets in there that we go, you know what, this is really cool. This is the coolest place to live. And that takes listening, but you just want to represent people in a positive way. And they go, where if I'm out in public, I feel good with, people do come up and say, thanks for serving. So, that's where I'm at with that.
Bob?
I was going to say that, my background, James, was from the hospitality industry. So it's a matter of, I feel like, as everybody else is saying, serving people, but also the pride that you have, that when you have pride in your own home, you have pride in the community, you want to preserve it, keep it that way. So you kind of want to be part of the community and serving the community and solving issues and problems. So while you may have crabgrass in your front lawn, somebody else has got a problem down their street, or with speeding, or with potholes, or whatever it is. And I think I look at my role as solving problems for people that are in like-minded, mode. They want to live just like I want to live, if that makes simple. By the way, thank you very much. I appreciate your respect for the other council members by wearing a mask. I appreciate you doing that, so thank you.
Are you calling me out for not wearing one?
No.
I'm just kidding.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I'm teasing. And any other questions from
Any other
council?
questions for us?
Not for me, I'm good.
Thank you for
All right.
coming
Yeah,
in
thanks for
and
coming
throwing your
in.
hat in the ring. I
Appreciate
appreciate it.
Right.
Thanks.
Okay.
You too.
All right.
Okay, so we cannot discuss because our agenda says to conduct the interviews. So can we go ahead and can we call, should we wrap this up, or can we go ahead and call for another special meeting to,
You can,
Or can we,
we can't recess it?
I would not recess because the
Because
agenda that was
it's still
published,
conduct.
yeah,
not
was to conduct
discuss.
interviews.
okay.
So you just have to give 48 hours, and y'all can either do that now, scheduling, because that's administrative, or just go ahead and adjourn and kind of meet afterwards.
And
Just
call for a special meeting
Yeah,
to
just
make an
work out your
announcement,
schedules.
I
Yeah,
assume, or
right. And
discussion.
that might be easier, just with schedules to do it afterwards instead of in a meeting.
Okay, all right, perfect. Okay, so I'd like to make a motion to adjourn the special meeting at 6:40 PM, 6:41 PM.
Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes.
All right.
Thank you all for who signed in.
Yes, thank you so much. Bob, we'll get up with you about another special